What if the most sacred symbol of royal legacy wasn't passed with ceremony, but with secrecy? What if Balmoral, the fortress of generational power, changed hands, not in a grand announcement, but behind thick stone walls as twilight fell? As summer loomed, King Charles made a decision that sent tremors through the monarchy's very bones. He quietly handed over Balmoral to Prince William. But why the silence, and why now? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The story didn't begin with a press release or a grand procession through the Scottish Highlands. It began with a whisper heard not in Parliament nor the press gallery, but among the oldest staff of Balmoral Castle itself. In April, just as the snow was retreating from the outer moors, a trusted member of the royal household overheard something chilling. The title deed to Balmoral had been signed in secrecy, not in a London office, but within the very walls of the estate. There was no fanfare, no televised ceremony. There was only ink, paper, and a decision that bypassed tradition. It wasn't merely property that had shifted, it was the silent centre of power. The deeper this revelation sank in, the more it rattled those close to the crown. Camilla, Queen Consort, was notably absent from all meetings related to the transfer. Not one memo bore her name, not one document copied her signature. For a woman who had carved a place for herself at the heart of the new monarchy, this exclusion was seismic. Palace aides have admitted off the record that Camilla wasn't even aware of the transfer until days after it had already been finalised. The exclusion was not procedural, it was personal, and it opened a floodgate of questions about her standing in the eyes of the king. Then came the summer orders. Staff were told, in quiet tones and without written instruction, to prepare William's suite at Balmoral earlier than usual. Not in July, not in late June, but by the second week of May. That timing was more than just suspicious, it was symbolic. For the royal family, summer at Balmoral isn't just holiday tradition. It's ritual. It's where monarchs contemplate legacy. It's where decisions are made behind closed doors, and where dynasties are reshaped with little more than a glance across a garden table. Preparing William's presence this early marked a shift, a forewarning to the staff that Balmoral would never feel the same again. Sources close to the estate began to note other subtle shifts. The main corridor portraits were reframed, certain guestbooks were removed from their public cases, and curiously, some of Queen Elizabeth's personal artifacts, those untouched since her passing, were reportedly transferred into William's care. There were no explanations, there was no briefing, just silence, careful glances, and unspoken knowledge that something larger had begun to unfold. The castle itself, remote, historical, fiercely private, has always stood as a symbol beyond politics. It isn't just stone and land, it's where secrets live, where the monarchy retreats not to escape, but to plot. And now, that bastion had a new master. Not by vote, not by ceremony, but by legacy, passed through silence. The timing, too, was impossible to ignore. With the world distracted by Charles's public engagements and William's appearances in Wales, Balmoral became the one place the handover could be done without the weight of cameras or critics. But Balmoral was never just bricks and moors. It was a throne veiled in wilderness, and someone was watching quietly as their influence began to evaporate. How does a queen react when the doors to the kingdom's most sacred sanctuary no longer open for? Camilla's quiet fury turned to silent despair when she discovered the Balmoral transfer had occurred without her knowledge. And the betrayal cut deeper than she expected, not just political, but deeply personal. The revelation reached her, not through Charles, not through William, but through a fractured whisper circulating inside the palace walls. One moment she was fulfilling her public role in London, smiling beneath chandeliers at a charity gala, embodying stability and duty. The next, she was confronted with the reality that while she was performing loyalty in public, power had shifted in private. Balmoral, long regarded as untouchable ground, the emotional spine of the monarchy, had been signed away without so much as her name crossing the conversation. For Camilla, this wasn't an oversight. It felt surgical. Those close to the inner household insist her absence that evening was no coincidence. It was timing engineered with precision. While Camilla was occupied, documents were finalized, seals pressed, and silence maintained. The palace did not call. No aid intervened. No warning was given. It was as if the monarchy itself had decided to move around her rather than with her, and in royal terms, being bypassed is far more devastating than being opposed. The wound reopened old tensions that had never truly healed. Camilla's earlier attempts to modernize Balmoral's subtle changes, quiet suggestions, gentle revisions to tradition had already stirred resentment among royal traditionalists. To them, Balmoral was not a canvas for reinvention but a relic to be preserved. Every suggestion she made had been quietly logged, quietly judged, and now, in this transfer, it felt as though those objections had finally found their answer. Balmoral would be protected from her. What followed was more unsettling than confrontation, silence. William offered no acknowledgement, no priv, reassurance, no formal courtesy. The coldness wasn't loud, it was absolute. That absence of response spoke volumes, reinforcing a growing belief that this move wasn't merely about succession planning, it was about insulation, about creating distance, about ensuring that William's future authority would grow untouched by Camilla's shadow. Speculation quickly hardened into belief among palace watchers. Charles had made a choice not just as a king, but as a father, a decision to shield his heir from internal influence, even if it meant emotionally isolating his wife. For Camilla, the realization was crushing. Balmoral had represented belonging, sanctuary, acceptance, and now it had become a symbol of her exclusion. In the days that followed, whispers spread that Camilla had quietly refused invitations to return to Balmoral, not out of defiance, but out of pain. To walk its halls now would mean confronting the truth that her presence there was no longer required, perhaps no longer wanted. And in a monarchy built on appearances, nothing is more dangerous than a queen who feels erased. But as Camilla wrestled with her diminishing grasp, another figure was stepping into the heart of Balmoral's ancient legacy, one groomed not by ambition, but by destiny. In the stillness of the Scottish Highlands, away from London's roaring press and political theatre, a silent coronation was taking place. Not with a crown, but with keys. Not with applause, but ancestral ghosts watching as Prince William took possession of the castle that crowned sovereigns in silence. What the public believed to be a routine heritage inspection was, in fact, anything but. William's return to Balmoral had been choreographed with meticulous discretion. The official line whispered through press liaisons was that he was touring the estate for historical documentation purposes. But inside the castle walls, those closest to the monarchy understood this wasn't a visit, it was a passage. The inspection was cover for something far more powerful, the quiet claiming of a legacy that had never needed a throne to be felt. This wasn't an administrative act, it was spiritual inheritance, passed not through decree but presence. Behind closed doors, within Queen Elizabeth's private sitting room, untouched since her passing, an unexpected gathering took place. Not a council, not a formal audience, but a deeply strategic convergence of the monarchy's inner circle. Senior royal advisors, handpicked not for status but for unwavering discretion, met under oath to witness a symbolic act, the unlocking of the Queen's private study. This room, shielded for generations, was a sanctuary reserved only for reigning monarchs or their chosen heir. The key had been dormant for months. That it now turned in William's hand was no accident. It was confirmation. Outside, where the Highland air wrapped around the castle like history's breath, there was a different kind of stillness. William walked the estate alone. No fanfare, no aides trailing behind with ceremonial folders. Only 2 armed guards remained at a discreet distance, sworn to silence and tasked with shadowing, not escorting the future king. Their presence, while unspoken, reinforced the weight of what was unfolding. Every step William took was layered with memory, his childhood summers, his grandmother's voice echoing in those woods, the legacy he never asked for but could no longer refuse. Local villagers, those who've lived generations beside the royal rhythm, noticed something strange. The crest outside Balmoral's front gate had shifted overnight, a minor change to most, but not to those who knew. The symbol now bore a subtle addition, one linked directly to William's lineage. The visual confirmation, though quiet, was definitive. The castle had not just been passed, it had begun to transform. from sanctuary to seat, from tradition to authority. What came next was never recorded in official logs, but it was spoken of in hushed tones by those close enough to feel the reverberations. A private blessing delivered not in chapel light, but in a candle-lit room by a senior figure of the Church of Scotland. It wasn't meant to be known publicly, no photos, no transcript, but the act itself carried weight. It marked the moment the sacred became personal. It wasn't political, it was dynastic, but every quiet rise begins with a louder fall, and one royal's legacy may have just been rewritten without their consent. Buried beneath royal protocol and political duty lies a father's guilt. A sealed letter discovered in the Balmoral library written in Charles' own hand reveals a secret confession that may explain everything. Not just about Balmoral, but about his fading crown and the son he once doubted. The letter wasn't catalogued. It wasn't even formally dated, only the faint ink of a handwritten month, written in a hand less steady than usual, marked its creation. It was addressed to William in a tone neither regal nor rehearsed. There were no titles, no official headers, just my son, and a silence between the lines that bled with exhaustion. Within its folds, Charles laid bare his soul, confessing to something that had long haunted him. He admitted that his body was beginning to betray him, that his grip on the sprawling machinery of monarchy had grown weak, not from lack of will, but from a mounting fatigue that no ceremony could mask. His words were not commands, they were admissions. The kind of thoughts a monarch never says aloud unless they fear the clock is no longer their friend. In the letter, Charles wrote that Balmoral had always been intended for William not simply as inheritance, but as sanctuary, as the SP, a ritual core of a crown that had broken men and made ghosts of kings. But he hadn't acted on that intent sooner, he confessed, because of what he called pressures I no longer name. Pressures from within the institution, pressures from within the family. Expectations shaped not by legacy, but by conflict. And in that admission was an echo of pain, the acknowledgement that monarchy is not a crown, but a cage. Perhaps the most haunting passage came in reference to Queen Elizabeth. In delicate script, Charles recalled her final days, moments rarely spoken of in public, and a whisper she shared when no courtiers or aides were near. She had looked at William, he said, and uttered only 3 words, "He is ready." That phrase, Charles admitted, never left him. It haunted him not because he doubted it, but because he feared he was never truly ready to let go. That fear, he now believed, had delayed what was inevitable and perhaps rightful. Charles ended the letter with a plea, not a directive. He asked William to keep the transition quiet, to spare the institution the spectacle, and to grant him dignity in this shift of power. No fanfare, he wrote, only loyalty. Let Balmoral whisper what others will shout. It was not the voice of a reigning king, it was the voice of a father making peace with time and with truth. Speculation surged after the discovery. Many now believe this letter is the reason William has remained silent in public, why no formal statement was issued, why every change at Balmoral unfolded in near invisibility. It wasn't political silence, it was reverence, an heir honouring a father's final act of clarity. But peace is a fantasy in royal circles because another heir watched all of this unfold from the sidelines, and silence wasn't in his blood. When the Balmoral transfer hit the inner circle, it wasn't just Camilla who was caught off guard. Across the Atlant, Prince Harry reportedly erupted in disbelief. For a man once told he'd never be truly royal without Balmoral's soil under his boots, this was more than a snub. It was exile sealed in stone. The reaction, as relayed by a close friend, wasn't calculated, it was explosive. "They buried the heart of the monarchy," Harry allegedly said, "and left me outside the gate." The words weren't metaphorical. They carried decades of buried pain, unresolved loyalty, and the unmistakable sting of being deliberately shut out. The castle that once echoed with Diana's laughter, the place where royal bloodlines found their grounding, had been passed to his brother without a whisper in his direction. And for Harry, that silence cut deeper than any public scandal. Sources inside Montecito claim Meghan's response was colder, but no less charged. She reportedly told her aides, "This is exactly what Diana feared would happen, that her second son would be kept close enough for show, but never close enough to matter." Her words struck a chord that many had tried to ignore, because Balmoral was never just another property. It was sacred ground, a place where belonging wasn't spoken, it was proven. And now that inheritance had bypassed Harry completely. For years, Harry had struggled to reconcile his royal blood with the reality of his position. He had accepted distance, he had accepted criticism. But the complete erasure from this particular decision, the estate that symbolized the very soul of the family, was the final confirmation. His role had not just diminished, it had vanished. He was no longer part of the decisions that shaped the monarchy's inner identity. And that realization broke something in him that titles never could, but the sting went further than personal identity. Harry had dreamed of one day walking the Balmoral grounds with his children, offering them the stories of their grandmother, letting them touch history with their own hands. That dream, quiet and unspoken, now seemed permanently revoked. They weren't just denied access, they were denied legacy, denied the unspoken message that they too belonged. In the shadows of this emotional storm, whispers of a conspiracy took root. Some sources began suggesting that the letter Charles wrote to William, the one discovered in the Balmoral library, originally had a second page, a page addressed to Harry, a page that was either removed or never written. And the absence of that page now feels like a betrayal that speaks louder than any direct dismissal. The idea that Charles could bare his soul to one son while offering nothing to the other, no closure, no justification, has left royal observers divided and supporters of the Sussexes enraged. Online, Sussex loyalists have begun questioning the monarchy's moral core. Was the transfer about tradition or about elimination? Why was Harry denied any consultation, any recognition, any involvement? The questions, once whispered, have now become demands for accountability. But accountability doesn't live easily inside royal palaces. It hides, it stalls, and it waits. And yet, while the past clashed with the present, another royal was quietly arranging Balmoral's future, and the choice would trigger another royal confrontation. While all eyes were on William, it was Catherine who was quietly transforming Balmoral from a mere estate into a royal powerhouse. From staffing changes to symbolic artifacts being repositioned, her fingerprints are now on every corridor. But who gave her the authority, and why does no one dare question it? Behind the grandeur of royal protocol, Catherine was executing a quiet, calculated operation. Without public ceremony, she began reorganizing the very soul of the estate. The guest wing, once arranged under Charles's vision and influenced by Camilla's aesthetic, was swiftly restructured. Rooms were reassigned. Seating charts that had remained unchanged for decades were redrawn in a matter of days. But this wasn't aesthetic, it was symbolic. Power in the monarchy is never declared out loud. It's proven in who sleeps where, who's invited, and who isn't. And Catherine, with the precision of someone who understood the weight of legacy, was redrawing those invisible lines. One of her earliest and most controversial decisions involved the reactivation of Queen Elizabeth's personal library protocols. Locked since the Queen's passing, this space had long been considered sacred, even untouchable. But Catherine had it reopened not for display but for access. Only select historians and archivists were allowed in, and only under her authority. She began hosting closed-door discussions within those walls, summoning advisors and scholars not typically associated with day-to-day royal operations. It wasn't just about preserving history. It was about reinterpreting it on her terms. Meanwhile, staff began to feel a change that went unspoken but undeniable. Long-time employees known to be loyal to Camilla were quietly reassigned, retired early, or replaced altogether. Their exits weren't announced, their absences weren't explained. In their place came new faces, discreet, efficient, loyal to Catherine's chain of command. With each subtle change, it became clear a new order was being established inside Balmoral, and the Queen Consort was no longer its architect. Perhaps the boldest move came when a rare brooch, once worn exclusively by Queen Elizabeth during her Balmoral retreats, was placed on display inside Catherine's private study. It hadn't been seen publicly in years. The choice to exhibit it wasn't merely decorative, it was declarative. Without uttering a single word, Catherine had placed herself in the Queen's spiritual lineage. The message was received by every aide and advisor who passed through that office. She wasn't borrowing power, she was claiming it. Rumours swirled that Catherine had taken a particular interest in Balmoral's symbolic architecture, family crests, royal insignias, and ceremonial branding. Sources close to the design committee revealed that she had reviewed proposals for a new Balmoral emblem, a fusion of past and future that subtly repositioned the estate under the influence of her branch of the family. And while no official decree confirmed her authority, no one within the palace seemed prepared to challenge it. Inside the halls, the whispers grew louder. Catherine was now the one setting Balmoral's tone. The Queen Mother's presence, Elizabeth's elegance, Diana's unspoken shadow, all seemed to converge in her. She wasn't just reshaping Balmoral, she was reanimating it with a legacy she intended to command. And yet, in the midst of her silent ascent, something stirred beyond her. Control. But as Catherine restored echoes of a queen past, an unexpected visitor arrived at Balmoral's gates, one who refused to leave without answers. When Princess Anne shows up uninvited, royal aides know to brace for storms. Her arrival at Balmoral without a security escort, and with an unreadable expression, left everyone shaken. What did Anne know? What had she come to retrieve? And why did she request an audience with Catherine, not Charles? The black vehicle pulled up to the estate without any prior notice. No one was alerted, no schedule had been circulated, and yet, within minutes, word spread like wildfire through the Balmoral corridors. Princess Anne was at the gate, and she wasn't here for pleasantries. She made only one demand: total privacy. No cameras, no aides, no records of her entry or exit. Even the household staff who opened the gates were asked to retreat once she stepped inside. This was not a royal courtesy call, it was something far more consequential. What followed behind those locked doors was shrouded in silence. For over 3 hours, Princess Anne met with Catherine. No Charles, no William, not even private secretaries were permitted to stay in the room. The doors were closed and no voices escaped. But for those stationed just beyond, the tension inside was unmistakable. Raised tones, long silences, and the pacing of footsteps spoke louder than any official memo. Something had shifted, and something had been confronted. Whispers inside the palace later painted two different pictures. Some claimed Anne had come to challenge the speed and secrecy of the Balmoral transfer. She wanted answers as to why the ancestral seat of the family had been handed over in silence without the consultation of senior royals, without so much as a whisper to those who had walked those grounds since childhood. Others, however, claimed the conversation took a different turn, that Anne wasn't fighting Catherine, but aligning with her. That beneath the surface of tension was a deeper understanding. That perhaps Anne saw something in Catherine that echoed the principles Queen Elizabeth held dear. What can be confirmed is that Anne did not leave empty-handed. When she finally emerged from the meeting, her expression unreadable, she was seen carrying a small lock chest, wooden, aged, and unmistakably marked with the late Queen's private insignia. No one knows what was inside, no one dares ask, but it hadn't been seen since the Queen's final summer at Balmoral. Whatever it contained was not ceremonial, it was personal. And then came the final remark. Just as she crossed the inner courtyard, Anne turned to a senior staff member, paused, and with a gravity that silenced the air said, "You've moved the soul, let's hope you know what you've done." It was not a blessing, it was not a threat, it was a warning, a deeply personal one. Because for Anne, Balmoral wasn't just a piece of land, it was memory, legacy, the place where her mother reigned, not with power, but with presence. But even Anne couldn't predict the final twist, because Charles had one last act to perform before Balmoral's new chapter could truly begin. They say a monarch's final visit to Balmoral is never announced, it simply happens. Days after the transfer, Charles appeared at the gates under thick fog. No trumpets, no guards, just one man returning to say goodbye to the place that shaped his destiny, and perhaps watching it slip into someone else's. There were no formalities, no motorcade, just a single car, understated and unfamiliar, pulling past the gatekeepers who instantly recognized the silent weight of the moment. Dressed not in royal garments, but in plain civilian clothing, Charles stepped out accompanied by only one aide, an old confidant who had served the family long enough to understand when words were unnecessary. The castle had already shifted into William's sphere, but this visit wasn't about authority. It was about closure. Witnesses on the grounds say he walked with slow, deliberate steps toward Queen Elizabeth's private garden, a place few dared enter, even in her lifetime. And there, alone, Charles remained for over 2 hours. Not speaking, not reading, just sitting. Perhaps remembering the summers where he once sat as a boy beside a mother who carried the weight of an empire without ever appearing burdened. Or maybe contemplating how fast everything had changed, how the kingdom he inherited had passed through his hands faster than anyone had dared predict. The world had moved forward, and now Balmoral too had moved on. At some point during that visit, a royal vehicle was seen being loaded with several sealed cases. The contents remain unknown, but the cases, large, metallic, discreet, were carefully stored in the back of the vehicle before being transported directly back to Windsor. Speculation surged. Were they personal journals, family documents, private artifacts Charles wanted to preserve? No one could say for certain. And those who knew were under strict silence. What's clear is that Charles wasn't just visiting. He was reclaiming pieces of a legacy before it was redefined by another. Before leaving, he made one final stop. The old stone chapel near the edge of the estate, the very same chapel where Queen Elizabeth often prayed in solitude. There, Charles is said to have lit a single candle, alone, no service, no choir, just silence and the flicker of a flame left burning after he walked away. The gesture was understated yet profound, a symbol of ending and of grace, of mourning something deeper than tradition mourning time. Aides later described his demeanor not as defeated, but as hollow, resigned, nostalgic, and utterly exhausted, one said. It wasn't the exhaustion of duty, it was the kind that comes after a long goodbye. Charles returned to London that same evening. No statement, no comment. Since that day he has not spoken of Balmoral again, as if naming it would unravel everything he tried to hold on to for so long, as if his silence was the only thing left he still controlled. But as Charles disappeared into the shadows of legacy, the estate's silence now belongs to William, and what he chooses to do with it may determine the monarchy's next storm. Balmoral has always belonged to the crown, but now it belongs to a choice. As William stands alone at the helm of the castle that witnessed queens and kings fall in silence, one question remains: does this transfer signal strength or surrender? The next chapter of the monarchy won't begin in Westminster, it begins here. Rumours have already begun circling that William's final acceptance ceremony, if it can even be called, that will take place on Midsummer's Eve, a date long steeped in royal lore and Celtic symbolism. Nothing official has been announced, no invitations sent, but aides have been quietly briefed, logistics discreetly arranged. It will not be a coronation, nor a celebration, but something far older and far more symbolic. It's said the silence of midsummer at Balmoral carries voices from centuries past. If true, William has chosen the perfect moment to step fully into the legacy he's long resisted and now fully owns. In preparation, sweeping changes have already begun within the estate's command structure. A new set of security protocols has been issued, distributed under the name Windsor North Directive. The document, though classified, is said to redefine the estate's internal governance, limit press access, and introduce royal-only zones areas, strictly forbidden even to high-ranking staff. This is not modernization. It's territorial consolidation. William is turning Balmoral from a public relic into a private nerve centre. And with that shift comes one clear message: Balmoral will no longer be the monarchy's photo backdrop. It will be its war room. His first official act post-transfer has confirmed this. Several areas of the estate that were once open to the public guided tours, seasonal exhibitions, and even certain portions of the castle gardens have been sealed off indefinitely. No explanations, no apologies. The Crown's estate is becoming something far more restricted, far more strategic. To some, this is a betrayal of tradition. To others, it's a necessary tightening of royal boundaries in an era where scrutiny can cripple power faster than scandal. The speculation doesn't end there. Multiple sources have hinted that William intends to use Balmoral as a private retreat for future heirs, a secluded space for training, reflection, and internal decision-making beyond the noise of Westminster and the pressure of Buckingham Palace. If true, Balmoral is no longer a resting place. It is becoming a crucible. And it's here, not in the capital, where the monarchy's long-term vision will quietly take shape. As for Catherine, her influence continues to deepen. It has now been confirmed that she has assumed full management of Balmoral's estate records and all official correspondence. Nothing enters or leaves the estate's paper trail without her eyes passing over it first. Historians, archivists, and even estate managers now answer to her office. She is no longer simply the Princess of Wales. At Balmoral, she is the steward of continuity and the gatekeeper of memory. And in that final shift lies the unspoken truth. Balmoral didn't just change hands, it chose its next ruler. Through quiet acts, hidden movements, and ceremonial restraint, the estate has cast its vote not with words, but with inheritance. And William, with all the weight of his family's past behind him, has accepted that choice with solemn purpose. And so, as the Highlands cradle their secrets, a quiet war for legacy continues behind ancient stone walls. The castle may be still, but the monarchy is never silent. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.